advantage of the opportunity. But right now is about right now.
The Plan B, Ohio State Buckeyes!
Give everything you got in your heart to this place.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Rushing the Field, presented by Xfinity. He's Joshua Perry. I'm Nicole Auerbach. We have a national champion, and it is the Indiana Hoosiers. We're going to wrap things up on the 2025-2026 season, tie up some loose ends, other thoughts coming out of the national championship game in Miami. We're going to talk about what's going on with Darian Mensah and Miami as well, and then some early top 25 reactions. So we've got a lot we want to just kind of tie the loose ends on. And I just wanted to note right off the top, this will be our last podcast for about a month or so. We're going to be taking a break for the Winter Olympics because I will be in Italy. And I think it will be a little bit difficult to keep up with college football off-season news while I'm there. So Joshua, we're home. We have at least one good night of sleep, recovered from the national championship. How are we doing? How are we feeling about what we just saw in Miami?
I mean, I think you and I understood how good Indiana could be, how good they were before a lot of other people did. So it didn't take me all that long for it to really set in, right? Like after the game, I was still kind of like, oh my gosh, they actually did it. But not too long after that was I like, well, they were the number one team in the country. And like, we kind of watched them just dominate teams. And by the way, last year they took a pretty big step, and yeah, maybe they came up short there at the end of the year against Ohio State and Notre Dame, but those ended up being the two best teams in the country when it was all said and done. So it's really an interesting thing because I think there are a lot of people who are still like, Indiana just did that. But when you actually think about the build that they've had over the last 2 years, it really feels like the team that should have won the championship all along.
It's funny, though, because there are a lot of, different statisticians and some of our friends in the advanced analytics space. They were kind of going through where you typically see a team take a jump to be able to win a national championship. And obviously it's not usually this quick, right? But usually there's other signs and other steps along the way. We do have to kind of recalibrate a lot of things in this era. And it's not just that the portal exists and NIL exists. It's that you have immediate eligibility and unlimited transfers. Like that's the piece. I know that's the shorthand when everyone says portal, that's what they mean. But like, we need to underscore that part because that's why, Alabama and Georgia and people, can't stockpile the teams and the rosters the way they used to, because guys can go leave and play right away. They don't have to make that decision to sit out for a year or just wait your turn for a year and play under Nick Saban or Kirby Smart or whoever it is. So that's a big piece of it. But yeah, I think we have been used to the idea that Indiana is good at football, really committed to football, spending like a big football power. And I think that has taken people by surprise, gradually over the last 2 years. People really were shocked by Curt Cignetti's decision to re-up in Indiana, heading into a really crazy coaching carousel where so many different Power 5 jobs were open, so many SEC jobs, Penn State, a lot of big schools were looking for coaches, and that he was like immediately like, let me sign on the dotted line. I'm ready to recommit and to stay. He's getting like his third raise since he got to Indiana last year.
I mean, the man deserves it.
He does. And there's like a provision in the contract that is going to make him top 3 highest paid coach in the country, which he should be, because that's something that I've been thinking about a little bit, Joshua. I mean, we've been saying it. I saw our friend Bruce Feldman wrote it, but Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football now, right? Like he has dethroned Kirby Smart from the top spot.
Without a doubt. And this is, when you say that, I think people get really sensitive because for some reason they take that as like, we don't think Kirby's a good coach, or we don't think Ryan Day or Marcus Freeman or Dan Lanning or whoever you want to put at the one, spots ahead of Curt Cignetti before this year. They act like we're saying that those people can't coach. And it's just not the case. It's just the fact that Curt Cignetti has proven his ability to win a title, and he's done it at a place that has historically never done it. And people would say up until this year would not be able to win a title. And I think the other thing that becomes intriguing when you talk about how good of a coach he is for so long in this sport, the best coaches were synonymous with being able to accumulate the best talent and to recruit the most difficult areas and to win the biggest recruiting battles. And as you and I have talked about, your ability to recruit and close on big time recruits is a secondary skill set in this day and age of college football. You actually have to be a coach, a strategist, a guy who can go in there, win in the margins, a guy who can go in there, create game plans, a guy who can teach his players, and ultimately a guy who can help develop in that way. And, Ryan Day could recruit. Kirby Smart could recruit. Dan Lanning can recruit. Like Cignetti, portal class looks pretty good, but we haven't seen that. And I think a lot of people are still stuck in that you have to be an A1 recruiter to be the best coach in the country too.
Well, also when you think about like coaching tiers, which, I used to contribute to, they do them at The Athletic, and other outlets do them too. Usually the top tier is the coaches that have a national championship. There's not many active coaches right now that have them. We're up to 4, right? It's
Right.
Dabo, Kirby, Ryan Day, and now Curt Cignetti.
Yes.
So that is the group that you're talking about when you talk about winning with a team that is not as talented as many of the teams that it played over the course of the season. You immediately need to give the edge to coaching, and then all of the other reasons that we've talked about his talent identification, the preparation, the coaching staff, all of the things that go into that, I think is part of it. I want to play sound from the press conference that Curt Cignetti gave the day after the national championship, which they make them do this at 9 a.m., which is so funny after they probably have not slept, just as we haven't. And I thought this was a really interesting observation about where college football is today. So here's Coach.
The question players just answered about Indiana, I think that's called a paradigm shift. It's kind of like people can cling to an old way of thinking, categorizing teams as this or that, or conferences as this or that, or they can adjust to the new world, the shift of the power balance in the way college football is today. So, I think to look back at what happened to Indiana previous to us coming 10, 20, 50 years ago, strictly lacked a commitment from the top. That's it. Plain and simple. Nothing else. And we have a commitment.
I think that's part of it. You also now have Curt Cignetti, and
Yeah,
you
it
have
felt like he was oversimplifying what
really was.
really
But
happened
again,
there.
but part of this is going to give hope to a lot more places.
Yeah.
And I
A lot of
think that,
places don't have that guy.
that's what so this is what I
Yeah.
want to go. I don't think everyone else is going to have a Curt Cignetti
No.
who comes with like these coaches that have been with him for when they were, at IUP or Elon, like that
Right.
they've been working together for 20 years or
Yeah.
10 years, whatever, forget what year he
Or
left.
the guy who is 10 years, over 10 years, or the guy who can say, all right, this linebacker maybe a little bit undersized, maybe not the fastest in a straight line, but he's really smart. He's got quick feet. He's got a really good punch. He knows how to win at the point of attack. I don't know a lot of guys that can do that at the level that Curt Cignetti has done it. And so,
Right.
yes, we've talked about elite alignment, and we've talked about that university probably needing to be studied in an academic sense on how they were able to fully align. We agree on that. But part of it was they also bucked the trend, and they went with the guy who was outside of the box as a coaching hire and ended up like getting the best coach in the game. That absolutely matters too.
Right. So I think that like people will be able to take lessons from Indiana and improve, in shorter timelines than ever before. Maybe people will look for outside the box hires and coaches that have had success at lower levels. We always say that, and then they still want the hotshot coordinator names, but whatever. There might be some that look outside of the box, but I just don't think you're going to see a bunch of teams that win national championships in 2 years. I do think you could see more of the non-blue blood teams get far in the playoff era. Like we've talked a lot about Texas Tech.
Sure.
Indiana feels like it's going to be a unicorn here. Like I think everyone can want to be them, can want to copy things that they're going to do, but they're not going to be Indiana. Indiana is Indiana.
It's a one of one. And like, even with Texas Tech, and like we've seen Texas Tech have like great years, right? Like
Yeah.
we've
Patrick
seen
Mahomes was there.
right. Right. I mean, who was it? Crabtree and like all those guys,
Yeah.
like they've had some of those teams where it's like, maybe not a championship year. They've had some very good years. Like Indiana, really, really difficult to look and be like, okay, what was the previous high point of that program?
It
Like
was
Michael Penix Jr. with the go-go
yes.
gadget arm, like that was
Yes,
that was
that
it.
was.
And like
That
outside
was.
of that, I can't tell you. And
Yeah.
that's where I think it's hard to say that we'll see something like this. Like even with Tech, they've been around talent. Like they've had some decent years. They've had a guy like Mike Leach, who a lot of people think is, one of the best guys to coach in the game of football, an innovator and somebody who people have modeled their programs after before. I just think it's different with Indiana.
Yeah, they have touch points to like the history of college football. Indiana did not. And yeah, I mean, you had Lee Corso, you had like some people who had ties to this program, but you never had those highs and those moments like you're describing. It's kind of why it was funny to talk to people over the weekend of like, hey, it's not like Indiana's like a long suffering fan base. Like they've not had these like crushing losses because they just never had hope. It was like a very different 138 years to get here.
Right.
But you never believed that you were a football place or football program. My cousins who would go to games, who went to Indiana did not go to games. Like it wasn't part of who they were. And I think that's totally different than like heartbreaking loss over heartbreaking loss after heartbreaking loss and then finally winning a title. So that's what's a little bit different about this. But I do think the hope that they will give to more people that something is possible at a place that never thought it was possible is huge.
I think that's important for sure.
But
really let's not get ahead of ourselves.
No, it is good for the sport. Yeah, we're just saying, like, you're not going to just don't expect a national championship in 2 years everywhere. Right. Like, I just think that's the part that's maybe not going to happen. We talked about this a little bit on the field, but like it's something I keep thinking back now, 2 days removed. Kind of the bigger implications for like the conferences involved in this. The Big Ten winning 3 in a row with 3 different teams. And the dynamics of those teams. So Michigan was like the blue blood that we had been waiting to come back and win a national championship and get back to that level. Ohio State was the team that was carrying the flag for the Big Ten for so long. Certainly in the CFP era, but also like BCS to CFP as well. And then you have the team that comes out of nowhere and suddenly, takes the nation by storm and builds themselves up into a powerhouse in 2 years. I want to underscore that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about what it means that the Big Ten is doing this. I think that the league is deeper than a lot of people give it credit for, right? That
Agreed.
Indiana obviously helps provide that. But like you look at going into next year, and we'll get into some of these early top 25s a little bit later. But like a couple of them have, let's see, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. You're seeing a lot of teams like all in the top 5, top 7. You're going to see Michigan in a lot of like the 15 to 20 range as people try to figure out what year 1 under Kyle Whittingham is going to look like.
Right. And
Iowa, like a top 15-ish type
that's
team.
what I was getting ready to say. Like, let's not forget that a lot of times these polls overlook the team like Iowa, who's always a top 25 team.
But
right?
I do see them. And then USC, top 15 in a bunch of these. Like, and you look at like the final AP poll too, you do start to see that there is that tier that's knocking on the door. And then also like depth doesn't matter as much. If you're getting 3 teams in to the playoff in a 12-team era and 2 of them are in the final 4 and one of them wins it, depth doesn't matter as much. But I do think that we are kind of underselling the level of depth in this conference because I do think people are going to wonder coming out of this, and this will be an off-season conversation, is the SEC still the best conference in America? Not by the metrics that the SEC used to say that it was the best, which was that a lot of different teams were winning national championships over a period of time.
It's an interesting conversation to address the 3 straight Big Ten teams that have won a title. One of the things that stands out is what we talked about with this idea of our mind shifting around what an elite coach looks like. I think Big Ten teams for the last 30 years of football have had to have better teacher coaches because they couldn't just do the we'll out recruit you thing because the recruits didn't live in their backyard anymore. This wasn't the days where the population was all in Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland. The steel mills shut down. the auto industry changed and people moved to the South. And so I think the
Air
Big Ten
conditioning.
changed. Right.
So you could live more in
You
the
could
South.
be comfortable down there.
Mhm.
And so I think the Big Ten changed in the sense of we got to be able to teach guys. It's, so Iowa, the Wisconsins of the world, but Michigan, Ohio State, right? Like have always been programs that have done a good job of developing players. So I think that is a big part of why once the talent started flattening, it felt like the Big Ten was ahead of the curve compared to the SEC. It's like, we're already coaching our guys. Like, we're already teaching guys how to be football players. The second thing that comes in, there's a lot of money in Big Ten country, and probably people, because nobody talked about the bagmen that ran around the Midwest, but everybody knew who all the big boosters were down South because those guys wanted a pat on the back when they were cheating to get dudes to go to their school. Well, as it turns out, when you make it above board, you start to look around and it's like, okay, a lot of leaders in industry and a lot of very important people, power brokers.
Giant alumni bases that are like super national. Indiana has a ton of East Coast alumni, students that go there.
And
a lot
that's
of money.
The other thing too. Minnesota, Minneapolis, big city, right? Chicago, a lot of Big Ten alum live there. Columbus, Ohio, for people who don't know, big city. Detroit. But outside of that, we got people on the coast too. All that to say, a lot more money around here than anybody was willing to give credit for before this thing started. And again, I think the infrastructure to actually get guys money now that it's legal was better equipped than it was in other places too. So outside of just the fact that the talent structure has shifted a little bit in the sport, I really do think that the way that Big Ten programs had done things in the past and the fact that they're these big schools with huge alumni bases was already going to work to their advantage in the new world of college football.
Yeah, I like all of that. I think all of that's valid. And just a couple points to underscore on the money front, because I do think it's also different when you're talking about like, the big car dealership owner who's got like, kind of a 5 or 6 places, kind of runs a state versus like billionaires. And Mark Cuban, who is all over the sidelines for all of these Indiana games and now, giving more because there's proof of concept. He did not give to NIL last year. He did this offseason because it's working, because you believe in the leaders that are there. So you have like a lot of
Shark Tank of him, by the way.
Yes, it is. But you have a lot of people that think that way from a business perspective. Like we talk about donor fatigue, and there's a lot of people. You got to have like layers of donors, because you can't just you can't have like a $30 million roster every single year that never does anything. Like there has to be proof of concept and momentum and growth and things. So that's been part of it too. I think just the level of money that we're talking about. And then like you think about who's sending their kids to go out of state to these state schools. That's a lot of money. These are people that have money. These are people that can afford to go to Miami, stay at these ritzy hotels, and spend $4,000 to go to the game.
I mean,
so
we see it all the time. We saw it, and we know, because you went to Michigan, I went to Ohio State. We would cover our teams in the postseason, and we would take over these different cities.
Yeah.
We just pack them out. We pack them out. Yeah. We knew we could travel.
This disposable income.
The Indiana people had the money. They just never had the reason to travel. And now we see what they can do too.
Correct. And again, maybe they're not going to do it every year. It gets old, right?
I don't know.
What a great problem.
Listen, I think they might do it every year.
They might. There are so many of them. There will be people who missed out on this year's run. But I do think that's part of this for sure. And then just again, like you said, teacher coaches, really good people who can help you determine positional value and understand things in the rev share era with GMs and how you're going to structure things. All of that is super important. And so they're just different skill sets than you needed to be great at, 5-10 years ago. And I just think the Big Ten has adapted really well to a lot of that in this world. And then, again, the idea that maybe you don't have as deep a depth down to like, team 12, like the SEC has. You're still being challenged enough to prepare your teams to go out and win a national championship. Like that's something that we'll see. And I think there are people, I guess I didn't comb through all the AP ballots, but people probably could have said that the second best team in the country this year was Ohio State. Like they were for most of the year. And I bet there are people who would make that argument at the end of the year too, even though, they lost when they lost.
I mean, I could legitimately argue third. I couldn't say second because we
They
watched
lost
the two
to
teams that they
Miami. Yeah.
lost to, right?
Mhm.
But I could see where people would start doing that thing that people like to do. And it is an intriguing thing because again, it's Indiana who is the champion and Ohio State was right there. You have to put Oregon in that conversation. And then maybe we also looked at that second tier that we said that the Big Ten didn't have for a lot of the season. And it's like maybe we didn't give USC enough credit for winning 9 games. And I know Michigan wasn't a murderer's row and they looked kind of ugly when they played the top teams, but like maybe we didn't give them enough credit for being a 9-win regular season team. Whereas in the SEC, you look at a 9-win team and you're like, oh, playoff contender. Like I might be pissed if we leave them out. And that's the difference in how we look at either conference.
And we'll see if that shifts a little bit heading into the offseason, because I do wonder what changes with the SEC going 3 straight years without winning a title. And in terms of like, again, the benefit of the doubt that the teams get, the way that we talk about them, the way that we think about them, the way that we kind of group those teams that we think could be national title contenders. I also think the ACC, and we've this has kind of been a B plot in a lot of our conversations, but the ACC was legitimized by Miami's run. Miami, of course, we've said this, they're back. They are now, a team that we can expect regularly to be in the CFP. They're losing a ton from this year's roster. Like the draft's going to be littered with Miami guys. So, maybe they take a step back from reaching the national championship game. But that was huge for the ACC to get there, to have this run after the way that people were talking about it, after the fact that its champion did not make the CFP because they were not ranked at all. That teams like Virginia and Georgia Tech were always kind of like in the teens in the committee's rankings, that Miami was getting ripped for like bad losses, to SMU and Louisville, even though those were decent teams. I think it's really big for them from a legitimization standpoint, heading into, again, another offseason where you're going to be talking about this. Clemson and Florida State have been down for a couple of years now. Miami, though, carrying the flag for the conference. Miami proving that they can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the country, beat 2 SEC teams and Ohio State to get to this, play Indiana tooth and nail to the final minute. I think that really matters for this conference at this particular point in time. It's coming out of, years of lawsuits where Florida State and Clemson want to get out because, it's a sinking ship or whatever the perception is. And here you are right there in the national championship game and able to say, like, look, this is an era where all you hear about is the Big Ten and the SEC, but we're right there. We got a team that was within a minute of in a comeback and a interception from Carson Beck that had a shot to go out there and win that game. I think that's really big for that conference. And then, of course, with the Big 12, you got Texas Tech that's reloading. They're not going anywhere. I think that's really important for the health of the sport overall.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's interesting, too, because nobody cares about the other bowl games until it's time to start cooking up narratives. But the ACC had a pretty good postseason as well. And I think that's an important thing to look at, is maybe all year long, we didn't give them the credit that they deserved as a conference, right? Like maybe all year we were just a step behind on the ACC. So I would start right there. I also think it's important that the team that was able to make a run out of that conference is one of the biggest brands in college football, just from a notability, history, recognizability standpoint, and that they made the run to the title after so many years of being prominent. I think that's important. And then I'd like your thoughts on this, because it almost feels to me like the ACC was better off this year having one team that could make a run to the championship game than having maybe 3 teams that got bounced really early. What do you think about that?
It's an interesting question, because I think actually having 5 teams in is part of what's fueling the SEC narratives, that they had almost half the field and didn't get a team to the championship game, and that Ole Miss was the last one standing. I think that has always been why I've given the edge to the ACC over the Big 12. Now, listen, this was before Texas Tech put a ton of money into this program and really want it to be a perennial power. But I always felt, because that's still not like again, they've had these, they're their points in college football history, but it's not like Texas and Oklahoma who were carrying the flag for the Big 12 before they left. I've always said the ACC had the higher top end teams, like had the bigger brands, the national title contenders, and that was more important in this world than parity in the Big 12, or that the Big 12 is a great basketball program. I know Brett Yormark believes that is undervalued, but we're talking football. Football is still what drives everything. And if you have Clemson, Florida State, and now Miami as teams that can like really win big in football, that's huge. When Clemson was the only one out of the ACC carrying that conference, that was still huge for them because you're always in the mix for the national championship game. So I've always thought that positioned them well to be, number 3, right behind the Big Ten, the SEC. But I still stand by that, even though, again, Texas Tech would love to be that team that kind of comes out of the Big 12 year in and year out. I think that's why it matters more the top end versus the total numbers. And listen, I know there's money involved and it affects the payouts. But Miami doing what they did also affects the money and the payouts. Advancing through all the rounds, having one team that could do all of that is better than getting 3 teams in that get bounced in the first round, or one team gets to the quarters and loses. It's a lot of this, again, so much of college football is arguing and so much is perception. And
it's
so
narratives.
Getting far matters a lot, I think, more than the total numbers of teams you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, I think the idea of saying that your conference actually had a team that could win it versus the SEC, which, what is it, the last 3 years they haven't had a team in the title game. Like, to me, like, congratulations, you got a whole bunch of teams that are pretty good. Like, where are your great teams at, right? And like, I think that's where it's trying to weigh, do you look at these things as a whole? And everybody always says, well, the schedule is so much harder and we're so much more beat up because we have so many more better teams. Just perfectly fine, but who can win it? Who can win it? And that's what I care about.
That's going to be the big question coming into next season. In just a second, we're going to get into these early top 25s. You see Texas all over them. You see Georgia all over them. Like, we thought Texas is the preseason number 1 coming into this year. So we thought that they had that team that was capable of winning a national championship. A lot of people picked Georgia when the bracket came out because of how well they were playing in November.
Right.
So you have to, though, be those great teams. You have to actually prove it when the games are played and over the course of the season. And that's going to be the big question, not just who can win the SEC next year, but are those teams at the very top, the SEC, actually the very top teams in the country again, which for many, many years, it was a default and they backed it up. That's the biggest difference. And I think, you're going to be adding a 9th conference game for the SEC next year. You're a couple years into adding Texas and Oklahoma, so it's harder than ever to go from the middle to the top. So again, the depth will be there. They'll beat up on each other, but you need those teams that are the cream of the crop that can then get to the playoff and be the cream of the crop there. So that's going to be such a fascinating dynamic heading into this offseason. Before we spin ahead a little bit forward and start talking about 2026, I do want to talk about the big news story this week. Of course, drops right after the national championship game. We turn the page. We're like, hey, what's Miami going to do next? We talked about this on the field, Darian Mensah, and the potential legal battle that was going to unfold. Well, it unfolded immediately, like 12 hours after we recorded that podcast.
Insane.
Duke University sues quarterback Darian Mensah on Tuesday. The judge denied a request for a temporary restraining order that would have prevented him from entering the transfer portal, because that was like kind of one of the initial things that Duke was asking. Obviously, he's been connected to Miami. This is part of when we talk about, hey, where's Miami going to go from here? This was the quarterback that we're penciling in that conversation, that the eggs are in that basket. I want to go through a couple of the arguments in this legal filing because it's really interesting. You and I talk about this a lot. Like, they're trying to argue things that would be a lot easier if you were paying them to play football. But
Bingo. They're
paying them for their NIL rights and then trying to create like, hey, this is damaging to us. Like, we lost value. But it's not directly tied to the football production. So it's a little bit of a hard argument. Okay, so here is what I think is notable. So, okay, he had a multi-year NIL deal with Duke. It was believed to be worth up to $4 million for the upcoming season. The deal expires December 31st. So again, like 2 full seasons. This is part of the lawsuit. Quote, Mensah reversed course, informed Duke he would seek a transfer, issued a public farewell. In doing so, he repudiated the contract. He proposes now to move on to another collegiate institution and act as if his obligations to Duke University do not exist. None of these facts can be disputed, but contracts mean something. Elsewhere in the lawsuit, they allege that if he goes to another school, he'll, quote, negotiate a license agreement for the rights that he has licensed to Duke. So you're kind of in this, like, it's a narrow case, right? Like, I mean, we talked about this when it was, potentially going to be Damon Williams too.
Right.
Like, contracts do need to mean something, and they're writing them.
They need to mean what they're supposed to mean too, though.
That's, I think, what's going to be really interesting. Like, how do you prove how damaging it is for him to leave if it's not that he was a really good football player? Here's what he did for our football team. And then the argument is like, we own his rights, and they can't, like, his rights become not valuable if he's not here.
And then, like, that's the question is, like, how enforceable is it, like, the whole whatever thing, because you can't tell him that he has to be there to play, right? That's pay for play. At that point, we're in trouble. Right. So I know it damages what you say is the value of the contract and the whole value of the license of the NIL. I totally get that. But at the same time, like, those things are fully intertwined to me. Like, I think it's hard to separate what a university pays to license a player's NIL and the idea that the player is being paid to play there specifically.
And the dollar figures that we're talking about.
Right.
Because why would an offensive lineman be paid X if people don't really know their name, image, or likeness?
Right.
They're being paid because that's a valuable position on the football field.
Interesting.
So I want to give you a comp here because I was thinking about this. Remember when we were always talking about, like, oh my gosh, Florida State, Clemson threatening to leave the ACC. What happens if Florida State just, like, decides to go independent or tries to, like, not pay a massive exit fee and they don't have their media rights? So basically, like, they would not be able to broadcast their home games. Like, that's what we're kind of talking about here. Like, when you're talking about, like, a very specific, like, your rights to your likeness, what does that even mean for Miami if they don't have them? Does that mean that they can't put him on any posters, or does it mean that he can't play football? Why would that affect actually playing football? Does it affect everything else? He can't, like, do a press conference. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I'm just tossing around ideas.
What if he legally changed his name? Like, does that change the Miami's ability to market him? Like, put his name on a jersey?
Because it's your image and your likeness as well.
I mean, but they can sell a jersey still.
Yeah, but I don't
that's
know.
what I'm getting at. Like, this is a weird thing. It's hard to try to say that, like, a person. Here's the other part about this too that I think is really intriguing is these contracts basically protect the university and their relation to the NIL rights, but an agent for Mensah can go market his name, image, and likeness rights to different companies regardless of what university he's at. And so to me, I just think it's hard to separate a human from their actual name, image, and likeness, like in this scenario. It's a weird thing to try to separate.
It is. And again, it's all they have, right? This is like when we talk about rev share, like, these are the contracts. These are the deals, NIL contracts, revenue sharing contracts, and they're not specifically to play football. Like, even the rev share, like, you're sharing money brought in from media rights and revenue that's coming into the school, but you're obtaining your players' NIL rights. Like, that's how it's being described, because they're not employees and they're not paying them directly.
Man. This would be a lot easier.
I think so,
and by the way, if I was a player, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to be employed by the university. I would like the world the way it is right now. It's crazy. I can't get fired. You guys are offering me these insane contracts right now. Like, I love it if I'm a player, but for the rest of the world, like, we need to just call it pay for play, and we need to address it as such, and then it becomes a lot easier.
So there is some time here. I know everyone feels like it's a huge time crunch because, you don't know if Miami has a quarterback for next year. What's Duke going to do? But I do sort of wonder how long this takes to kind of, figure out what happens here and what the outcomes are with this lawsuit. I also think, to me, the more likely outcome, and again, I know it's very, everyone's very angry, right? And this is like an intra-conference move. It's very complicated, but isn't the likely outcome that Miami just pays, like, buys out the contract, or, like, pays Duke to get his rights?
What number would you want if you were Duke, and what would you be willing to pay if you were Miami?
I mean, okay, let's say it's $4 million.
Yeah.
They just paid that for Carson Beck. Isn't that the going rate for a quarterback at that level?
I mean,
So
I
you
guess
just buy out the
if
contract?
I'm Miami, I guess I don't think I'm paying the whole $4 million at that point. Like, you guys aren't going to have the quarterback regardless, so you might as well just let him go for $3 million or $2 million. We'll make you whole. You guys,
No,
by the way, you haven't really
I'm
sold
saying,
anything.
no.
By the
I'm
way, you
saying to
haven't
get the
really sold
quarterback.
against anything. That's a fake number that you came up with, and we're trying to do the right thing and give you a little bit of money. But you guys already lost the quarterback, so just take this negotiated buyout and then let him go. Like, don't be an a-hole, because you'll end up looking bad to a certain degree too, that you're trying to make this kid pay so he can say I'm this kid and have his name on a poster. Like, it's an interesting thing even from that regard to me.
It is. And also, who owes it, right? Like, the player who breaks the contract or the school that's trying to get him, right? While he's under
the
contract.
School that made him, enticed him, induced him to break the contract. Yeah, they should probably pay.
Oh, you might say, yeah. Okay. So like, this is super interesting. And it's going to be fascinating how quickly it moves, what ends up happening. And again, like, what are some of the damages? Like, what is Duke going to be able to get? I mean, again, trying to stop him from going in the portal is one thing. I think at some point, and this is how we kind of felt about Demond, although he did come back, like, and he's going to try to repair all those relationships. Like, do you want to take someone back who's doing things like this? I mean, that's always a dynamic as well. I feel like it's more going to be monetary payback.
Yeah. I think, and I'm surprised that Washington got to that point, and that almost makes me feel like Demond didn't really want to do what he was getting ready to do. He almost felt like he had to. Yeah, and like he just kind of felt like there was no other choice. But if I was a school, I wouldn't want the kid back. This is the last thing I'll say on this, because I do think it's interesting when I was doing the, if I'm Miami, I'm not paying the whole thing. Like, at some point when this is being litigated, looked at, examined, whatever the case is, do you think Duke or universities would actually be asked to produce how whatever they're selling, how they got to the $4 million number? Because I would love to see that.
That would be fascinating.
Yes.
Now I kind of hope this continues on. I would love to get that. I think
it's an important thing here is, if you're saying that you're being harmed, I want to know what evidence,
where the value was.
What have you sold to different companies or to different sponsorships? What have you sold in terms of experience, activation, whatever the case is? I would love to see this, because $4 million is not it's a very significant number. Like, it's not made up. So show me how you didn't make it up.
Okay, I like that. So yeah, we'll again, we're going to be off for a little while. This will probably resolve itself while we're away. But really, so many interesting questions and wrinkles and ripple effects from this that will be worth pursuing and watching this off season. Joshua, before we go, we're trying to kind of set the table for this off season. And, a big storyline is going to be like, hey, what does Indiana do next? What do a lot of these top teams do next? We hit on it a little bit on the field on Monday night, but obviously they've got great portal guys coming in. Josh Hoover will be the quarterback from TCU. Obviously, he needs to make sure he's not throwing a lot of interceptions. If he can clean that up, he should be really, really good for them. Nick Marsh, I think, is going to be a fantastic receiver in the system. But you've got guys like Charlie Becker's young. He's coming back. He was such a breakout star over the second half of the season. You're losing a lot to the NFL and to graduation. But it just feels like you shouldn't doubt Cignetti and the way that he builds a roster and the way that he pieces this together. And probably the most important thing, even though they did just lose their strength and conditioning coach, is both coordinators are saying, these are the guys that have been with Sig for forever. Bryant Haynes, again, I've said this repeatedly. I voted for him for the Broyles Award. I think what he did with that defense was phenomenal. He's sticking around. What's next? What do you see for the Hoosiers this offseason, next season?
It's I think it's such an intriguing offseason because of what you said. Like, they'll have players that turn over and guys that were huge and instrumental in that build, but they'll keep a lot of the same staff. They'll have some of these players back, and the players that they got out of the portal, I think, are huge additions for them. When we won it in 2014, it was difficult to turn the page. And part of the reason why was because our run made some guys into legitimate superstars. Ezekiel Elliott became a star and like a guy who could hang out with, like, other athletes that are like professional athletes, which means that they're probably running in circles with celebrities. It was the same thing. Like, Joey Bosa was a household name. Braxton Miller, even though he was hurt, like, people knew who he was. Cardale Jones became a huge thing. Mike Thomas, I go through the list. And for Indiana, I think they're in a different spot because it was kind of this, yeah, we've got really good players, but like outside of Fernando, who is that person that you would say is a star that really cut through to different levels outside of just like, Indiana football or Big Ten football or college football?
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
okay, so I would give you a couple names. I would say Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr.,
Are
especially
they back?
Cooper. Well, what? No,
I
they're
said, are they
not. So
back?
I wanted to go with
That was our
They're
problem because
leaving.
all those guys
Yes.
were back. Yeah.
Yes. So
So
they're gone. Or I guess Surratt could come back. One of them could. Cooper could come back.
I think maybe Cooper. I think he might be a redshirt junior.
They should
but
both go.
Neither here nor there. I agree with that. I think they both go.
Fernando's the equivalent though, because
Right.
like D'Angelo Pons, who it'll be interesting to see like what his NFL feedback is because of his size. But
'Cause he's
yeah,
short.
it's
great.
not the same. I mean, Charlie Becker actually is like
So Charlie
he broke out.
B, I'll say this is, and this is no shade to Surratt or to Cooper, but Charlie B to me, I think was the guy who saved a lot of Indiana's ass this year
He's
against
the
Penn
reason
State.
I think
That
he is.
sideline catch.
Yep.
Nobody
Well,
talks about that one.
He had 2 catches in that game.
Yeah.
That were unbelievable. They got overshadowed by the Cooper
Yep.
toe tap.
He had that catch at
such
the
an
end of
unsung
the
hero.
Big Ten championship game.
Yeah,
And then that back shoulder, which was not a great ball from Fernando, which I want to talk about here in a second. Not a great ball from him. He saved some moments there.
they would not win this championship without
Agreed.
Charlie Becker. So
Agreed.
again, I think people know him a bit, but
Right.
it's not quite the same. Fernando is the level, right? Like Fernando broke through. He's a
That's what I'm
household
getting
name,
at. It's
and
like
he's
the breakthrough
going
star.
and he's going to the NFL.
And
So
he's
you don't
leaving,
have that.
and we had to
carryover.
wrangle. We
Yeah.
had to wrangle stars.
Their
and that
biggest
was
star is their
hard.
coach. Their
Right.
coach.
And he's
who's-
always wrangled, by the way.
Yes, he is always
he's-
wrangled, and he's 64. He'll be
So
fine.
I think it'll be a lot easier for them to regroup than other championship teams because of this idea of some of the star power that had to return to those teams, which I think is a benefit for them. I'm curious in terms of like distraction still in Bloomington. Like they'll be celebrating this championship into fall camp. Like it just happened. And I think when you're on campus, you can't let everybody pat you on the back and tell you how good you are and how good everything's going to be. And I'm sure Cignetti's going to have some great one-liners about that for his team, and maybe he'll share some with us. But I think the offseason after you win a title is so critical because I do think that the mentality of your locker room does change a little bit, and you have to be mature enough to get back to the same habits that brought you to your championship winning ways. So I wanted to say this, turning the page from that. Josh Hoover as an addition, I think is so interesting because he, to me, is a little bit more of a gunslinger type than Fernando, and certainly more than what I think Cignetti would ask of their quarterback to do in his system. Fernando Mendoza, to me, did not play a great game in the title game. Just like going back and watching it, he was hyper efficient when he had the free access throws in the RPO game. He was good when they had play action. Obviously, the run that he had on 4th down, like I'm not taking that away. I'm just saying in terms of like typical efficiency that we've seen throwing the football, when he had to go into drop back passer mode, it became a lot more difficult for him. It became erratic. He started to take some sacks. And even with him maybe playing a C game for his standard, they won the title. This to me is as quarterback friendly of an offense as you're going to get in the modern era, because they're going to let you throw it enough and you're going to have your opportunities down the field to be talked about as a guy who can win a Heisman and become the number 1 overall pick. But I don't think Curt Cignetti ever wants to put the game in a place where you've got to go out there 45 times and throw it to win. And I think whoever steps in at quarterback because of that can be a guy who has a lot of success.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be talking like first pick in the NFL draft.
No,
with Josh
but
Hoover.
still.
But yeah, I think he's gonna have a lot of success. Just want to mention a couple other pickups out of the portal. Talked about Nick Marsh, star receiver from Michigan State, Turbo Richard, running back, Boston College. You've got a couple edge rushers from K-State, AJ Harris, cornerback from Penn State. And then you're bringing in Joe Brunner, guard from Wisconsin. So it's actually very similar because he did this, like Pat Coogan was a really interesting pickup last year. picking up a lot of guys that they're like very familiar with in their area that they played against, Big Ten guys. And they piece them together and they have a lot of success in the Indiana system. So we'll get to this in 1 second because one of the early top 25s has Indiana as the number 1 team in the country, but going to be hard to just start the season doubting what Curt Cignetti is doing. We did last season. They were, I think, 20 in the preseason poll. People were like, Indiana, great story. We'll see. Like, okay, this is your new world. You're a top 25 team. Did not expect, like, no, you're the best team in the country. So as you look at some of these early top 25s, I just want to run through, start with the ESPNs. So I'll just go like 1 to 10. Indiana, Texas, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas Tech, Miami, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Alabama all the way down at 21, by the way. Just wanted to note that. The on 3 top 25, a little bit different. They've got Ohio State 1, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Indiana at 5, Oregon, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Miami, and Oklahoma at 10. So, but a lot of the same teams. Like these are teams that we saw in the playoff this year, teams that were super relevant to the story of the season this year. And again, at Notre Dame, we've said this as we've talked about Marcus Freeman and sort of the way the team coming out of this season. They are a championship or bust roster. Same with Oregon. Like some of these teams that we saw have tough endings to the season, not surprised to see them already kind of getting that type of attention. Preseason polls are going to be wrong, right? In this era, everything is drastically different. You don't know how new boosts are going to work. Really wrong last year. But this feels like the right grouping of teams to be talking about kind of heading into next season.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, the common thread with a majority of the teams that are there are returning quarterbacks. Like Indiana had to get one out of the transfer portal. Texas Tech got a quarterback out of the portal. Miami, of course, is getting their quarterback out of the portal. But when you look at the rest of the teams, Texas got their quarterback coming back. Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon with a huge returning quarterback. Julian Sands back at Ohio State, right? Like Texas A&M is going to have their guy back. So to me, I think that's important. The idea of being veteran, but also at the most important position. The interesting thing to me is like, it feels like we do this every year where we just kind of go with the typical names and the coaches that we're familiar with, etc. Notre Dame, should they not be the preseason number 1? They got the best quarterback, maybe.
I know.
Maybe.
I mean, you're losing Love and Price, right? So
I'm with you there. But we know that that's a team that wants to run the ball regardless.
I know, and they'll be able to
They've
run the ball.
upgraded at wide receiver too. Like their wide receiver group might be the number 1 crew from their number 1 to number 3, and then who they bring in rotationally after that. And I anticipate that their defense can take a step because some of their best players were also guys who had to return. So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
No, it's a fair question. I think that's a fair one. I was also a little surprised to see Texas so high, but then I thought about who they brought in, right? Yeah. And, kind of forgot that they flipped Hollywood Smothers. I think that's huge for the run game. Arch was really good by the end of the season.
He got better. I still think that I'm gonna wait and see. I'm not gonna be the guy.
I think we should because of what we thought we were gonna get last year.
That's why I'm not gonna do it. And more of this is about the way that we talk about him and what that means for him in particular, rather than being right on things. Like that got out of control, and I got to a point where I genuinely felt bad for him because he didn't ask for that.
Yeah, but again, you're adding Cam Coleman and Hollywood Smothers. Like those are two massive portal pickups. So yeah, I'm with you on not going overboard, but still being pretty excited about what that Texas offense is going to look like.
On 3, putting Ohio State at 1 is kind of insane.
I wanted to get your reaction to that. Where would you have them? Like what range?
I would have them somewhere between 5 and 10.
It's clearly because of the quarterback and Jeremiah. Like that's clearly
that's what it is. Everybody's like,
those
2 are back. Yes. But they have a lot to replace on defense, which they did a year ago. They replaced a ton of guys.
No, they do though.
It's a question. That offensive line was not good by the end of the year. So I got to wait and see if those guys can take a step in their development. And then outside of Jeremiah too, like there is a question at wide receiver depth now for the first time in over a decade.
And no Brian Hartline to plug and play, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens with all of that too. It's an interesting thing. Like Ohio State at 1 feels really insane to me, at least.
Any other final thoughts as we kind of, close the book on the 2025-26 season, start to look ahead to the fall?
Yeah, I'll say two things. Is number one, for a guy who has not been a huge proponent of playoff expansion, I think this might have been the best case for the playoff the last 2 years, was the ability for Ohio State and Notre Dame to be able to prove that they got better and that they could make a run as two of the top teams in the country that would not have made it was big. And then this year you have a team that historically would have never been in the conversation. Like if this was a 14 playoff or if it was the BCS, they still would have made it. But the idea that you had one of those types of brands and then Miami.
But I don't even think that they would have invested and been able to do it. Like I don't even think the path would have been there.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And then Miami, again, a team that people were dying to see become the U again, making a run is one of the last team in the field as an at-large, I think was huge. That's the first thing. The second thing is I am genuinely curious about this idea of no spring portal. And the only reason I say that is because I'm not sure that players are just going to accept the fact that they can't move schools after the spring. I watched a guy last year who did not even get into the portal and moved to a different school and played a national title game a couple days ago. Watch that happen. I'm not convinced that we're done with the roster movement yet.
You're not the only person who has told me that. One of the FBS commissioners told me that they expect that to happen as well, and to be
it's an interesting thing,
huge talking point. It's going to be really interesting. That is something to watch in March and April. What happens to these players that don't like where they're seeing themselves on the depth chart? We'll also get some final answers again about like playoff expansion, if it's going to go to 16, things like that, here in the next couple of weeks. But typically, February is a little bit quiet in this sport. We're going to be here at NBC very busy with the Winter Olympics. You will be able to see me in Italy. I will be on the slopes in the mountains, covering cross-country skiing and ski jumping, which ski jumping is insane. You should at least watch it just to see them do this, because it is a sport I would absolutely never try and would be way too terrified to even like watch someone do. And now it will be my job to watch all of these great ski jumpers just fly through the air every day that it happens in Italy. So I'm really excited
Very
for that.
excited for you. Very excited for you.
Thank you. And we'll have we're going to dive into the draft like we did last year. We're going to have so much fun with that. And our friend Connor Rogers, Chris Sims will join us. We'll do all of that once I get back. But yeah, this is it for the 2025-26 season. It was a blast. It was really, really fun and incredible. I think great for the sport to have a championship game like Indiana and Miami. The game itself was awesome. The two teams and their stories, their paths were incredible. The coaches involved. And now we're officially in this new world order. I think what Sig said about a paradigm shift with this championship is absolutely true. It felt like a pivot point for the way things were and the way things are now and what is possible. So it's a great time, I think, to be in college football, to be talking about this sport, to be working in it. It has been an absolute blast, Joshua, to get to do this with you every week, all season. I will miss you for the next month. I will bring you a souvenir from something. I'll bring you some snow, maybe from the Italian Alps. And maybe a snow globe. Maybe that's a better little souvenir.
Whatever it is, I'll be excited for it.
We're going to take a break basically for the month of February. So we appreciate all of you who have been listening, subscribing, rating, reviewing us. It's been so much fun. Rushing the Field is not going away entirely. We're taking a little hiatus for the Olympics, and we will be back to get into spring football, to get into the NFL draft, all of that to come later this spring. He's Joshua Perry. I'm Nicole Auerbach. This has been Rushing the Field presented by Xfinity. We enjoy doing this. We appreciate all of you for listening, subscribing, rating, reviewing, giving us feedback. It's been a blast, and we will see you in a few weeks. Hopefully enjoy some college hoops, some sleep, some Olympics in the meantime, and we'll talk to you soon.